The iPhone 14 Pro is here, and I've been spending some time on it. Even though this is called a day one video, I've actually had it for a few days now, but the first day was actually quite eventful. And in that time, I've gotten to know a little bit more about the main additions to this latest Pro iPhone, namely this new always-on display and lock screen, the updated camera system, and of course, right up here, the dynamic island. So let's take a look at what my time has been like so far with Apple's latest. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? These are my thoughts after day one with the iPhone 14 Pro. As always, starting things off with a little bit of gratitude. We're in the thick of the busy tech season, so I'm super grateful that you came to watch my video on the latest iPhones. In general, thank you so much for just hanging out with me today. There's a lot of content that I have planned on the latest iPhone, so to keep up with all of that, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Also, if you're interested in checking out the new iPhones for yourself, I went ahead and included links in the description and in a pinned comment for you to use. And with that, let's get into it. Of course, I will talk about the eSIM situation. Yes, these iPhones in the US no longer have a SIM card tray, and you can tell by just looking around this frame. There's like nothing here that can pop out anymore. Now, setting up my Google Fi service with this iPhone 14 Pro was pretty simple, but it was simple for me. After all, Google provides a QR code that you scan using the Fi app, after which time you have to get into the settings yourself and change a few things in the cellular network area. For major carriers, most people who buy this phone will get all of that internal stuff taken care of by whoever's behind the counter at those stores, after which time you'll probably never think about the SIM ever again. I get that, and that's fine. It's when you do even a little bit more with the SIMs that I get just a little bit worried. Even me, a tech content creator who switches phones often, I'm gonna have to switch my main service SIM between phones that support Google Fi eSIM, and that's not a very extensive list. So for certain phones, I'll have to keep at least one physical SIM handy, and of course any of the data-only SIMs that I got from Fi. And then, if you're looking to travel with these eSIM iPhones, you'll have to either pay for your international roaming or just deal with the lower speeds based upon whatever carrier plan you're using. Or you can get extra eSIM set up before you make your trip so that you're covered. There are ways around all of these things, but I think there's going to be some growing pains here, and maybe the main reason why I'm so conflicted about this move is because Apple just decided it's time for this to be a thing, and everyone else would just have to adjust. One day in the future, if all phones go eSIM, we're going to be looking back at this iPhone 14 lineup as where the shift began. Now, mind you, we're not looking at these phones as where eSIM only first started, because we've seen it a couple of times in Android already, but we are going to be looking back at the iPhone 14 line as where the industry started to shift after everyone took Apple's lead. It's probably a little cliche at this point to say that each new iPhone looks a lot like the last one. It's hard to expect that Apple will do anything drastic to the design language that has obviously worked for them for a few years now. That said, the new colors are always appreciated, and this space black in particular is really nice. I mean, for years we've had space gray and Apple together as synonymous terms, and I guess now you can say we're getting a little bit deeper into space. What's funny is that Apple went ahead and sent me cases for each of the currently available iPhones, and the one that they gave me for the Pro is this very light purple lilac case. This juxtaposition just makes me chuckle a little bit. Lilac probably would have made more sense on the deep purple colorway, which I have in the Pro Max model. Now, I did do an unboxing of all of the phones and their cases over on Instagram Live, and I do want to say I'm planning on moving unboxings over to that platform, so make sure you follow me on Instagram for more consistent live streams, and you know what, why not follow my TikTok for the shorter clips? Anyway, this is all to say that the iPhone 14 Pro won't look or even feel like much different than previous Pro models from a design standpoint. That is, of course, until you turn on the phone and actually see something new up top. Yes, this is the dynamic island. It shows up a lot better in lighter backgrounds, but yes, this is Apple's way of making sense out of punching out some of your screen real estate. In the past, we've had the huge unibrow up top, but now it's a pill hole, but there are pixels around it that are super anti-aliased. That way, it can make way for various animations that go in and out of the actual island. The island is supposed to be a place where you can see certain background processes working in real time on top of your current workspace. Like up here right now, you can see that I have a timer going right now, and I'd probably end up using that for like steeping some tea. Now, you get these little peeks here and there at what you have hiding in what amounts to the front-facing camera module. Is this like a revelatory change? Definitely not. What Apple basically did in creating the dynamic island is consolidate a few of the different software cues that might have otherwise been things like a pop-up notification or an icon in the status bar. Examples include the Face ID prompt for various forms of authentication. They just animate out of the dynamic island and then go right back in. It's a nice animation that is very pleasing to the eye. Or if you're going to unlock your phone, you just see a small lock icon up there in the island instead of a bigger icon being part of the lock screen like before. I also would not say that the island is any better at getting out of the way of full screen content than the original notch. In either case, I do eventually just get to a point where it just doesn't really bother me anymore. But compared to the original notch, the dynamic island is supposed to get your attention, and in the situations where you actually see it do its work, you'll inevitably become very aware of it. The main places where that has happened for me is in playing media. A number of media applications already slide right up to the island when you swipe away from them, giving you a persistent indicator that it's still in the background. By the way, this tiny waveform up here actually seems super accurate to whatever is playing. Sometimes waveform animations like this seem kind of arbitrary, but this one definitely isn't. Now, tapping the island brings you right back to the action in the app that you have stored up there. And then, if you tap and hold on that area, you get the small widget that might look similar to what you would have found in the notification shade, in the control center, or on your lock screen. I have to admit that this shift right here is totally fine for me. I know that people have been suggesting maybe switching the functions of the tap or the tap and hold, and I kind of agree with them, but I've gotten used to the way this is already. As someone who has YouTube playing basically all the time, I appreciate that there is an easy place for me to get back to the app rather than using all of the gestures for going through the recent apps. Okay, so after a day with the dynamic island, so far I can think of just one big feature I wish it had. I wish you could pin something up there. It could be any app, just one that I would want to have up there so that I can easily tap the front-facing camera and get back to that application super easy. I came to this thought after playing some media, mainly YouTube and YouTube Music. If I have YouTube Music going right now, I can press and hold and then pause it, but then it will slowly fade away and the media player is gonna go away, so I have to go back to the actual application and turn it on again. Give me the option to leave it up there, and I'll leave things like Notion for notes or Telegram for messages up there for easy access. By the way, speaking of Telegram, that's the only place that I've seen the island have like a rendering issue. For some reason, there is a virtual icon up top that says Telegram, but it's rendered above the camera module, so there's this awkward bit of blue sticking out. I don't really know what's going on there. Now, aside from the dynamic island, anything that feels truly different about using the iPhone 14 Pro really comes down to what was included in iOS 16. The most noticeable of them is the haptic feedback in the keyboard. The signature typing sound of the keyboard was already a nice layer to the experience, but now there's a bit of texture. It doesn't make me type differently or even faster, but good haptics should be used as often as possible, and that's one way to do it. I haven't had any issues getting things done with the iPhone 14 Pro, much like previous Pro models, but I will admit that despite installing a couple of games on here, I have not had a chance to put them to use on the Bionic A16 chip. I'm seriously so busy these days that gaming, much less mobile gaming, has taken a serious backseat in my life. What I have enjoyed using on here that is new is the always-on display and the new lock screen. Okay, always-on displays are really nothing new, and it's about time Apple figured out how they were going to do it. Honestly, it's a little bit fascinating. Instead of having just like a clock and some icons and small portions of, let's say, an AMOLED display, the entire lock screen is actually still visible, only the screen comes down to like a super low 1 Hz refresh rate. It does dim down everything, but pretty much all of the colors are still retained. This proved to be pretty confusing sometimes because I thought the phone was still fully on and had not gone into standby. I was afraid I was hemorrhaging battery life, but in reality, I was just looking at that always on display. What I like about this take on AOD is that most elements are still visible, and if you take advantage of the various options in the lock screen, the always on display ends up being pretty useful. On the lock screen, you press and hold, and then you can select various wallpapers, and after you select your wallpaper, you can select various widgets, right down to what kind of clock you're using. Now, I was hoping that almost anything could be selected out of the widgets, like maybe a Dexcom G6 widget so I can see my glucose levels easily, but for now this list is fairly curated. I went with world time zones and upcoming events via calendar. Now, as you can see here, those elements and the actual notifications have been moved down so that you can actually enjoy the middle portion of the wallpapers. But if you do use a portrait as your wallpaper, you actually have to ditch the widgets because by using them, you're losing out on that cutout effect that is pretty nice to see when you're using the portrait as a wallpaper. Overall, I like how the new lock screen looks and operates. Even notifications moving down to be accessed with a swipe up feels a little bit more natural. Even if notifications are basically life, they don't always have to be in my face reminding me of all of my stresses. There are better things to take up my attention. Even with the always-on display and the dynamic island always doing their thing, I didn't really have an issue with battery life in my first few full days. It might feel a little bit lower than before, but perhaps that's a placebo effect of having a screen that looks like it's fully on all the time, as opposed to being in a super low-powered state. We'll see in the longer term how this fares. But now for the cameras. We have here updated hardware and updated processing, which means this might be the most consolidated feature set we've ever seen on an iPhone. The main story here is that the main camera is now a pixel-binning 48 megapixel shooter. The ultra-wide has gotten an update as well, and the front-facing camera is getting autofocus. Now, this video is just a day one perspective, so it's not really a proper camera test, but in the first 24 hours of having the iPhone 14 Pro, I did take it to an event where I was meant to make some social media content. Perfect scenario for the iPhone 14 Pro to shine. It was at a small meetup with Zenjer, who were showing off their Super Bass V. While I was just doing my usual thing, shooting vertically for a simple TikTok and reel, the environs around us were perfect for some test shots. I mean, this was at the top of Mulholland Drive, which means views of Burbank and North Hollywood. Going from the 1x to the cropped in but still detailed 2x to the proper telephoto at 3x got me some nice shots, though going past those hardware capabilities to like 15 times obviously has diminishing returns. I did try to use the updated cinematic video, which now puts out 4K video recording even on the front, which is big, and something I'll definitely try using more as a result. So what you're seeing right now are just camera samples from this first day, this first event really, and you might notice a couple of familiar faces. Yes, those are Alan Pan and Jake Laser, who all made me feel like such a layman by bringing full-on engineering and science products to test the Zenjer power station. Alan lit up like a pickle, so now I know what an electrified pickle smells like. And Jake Laser brought his Thor hammer that actually shot out lightning. How I was included with these amazing content creators, I will never know. Anyway, evening came and I did what I could to get some low light shots, but in this situation things were lit well enough that I didn't have to use night mode too often. But you just go ahead and let me know how you feel about the camera performance thus far from these samples in the comments. There are other features in these cameras that I'll test out more in the coming days, but I did have one thing I wanted to try out. By now you've probably seen a bunch of camera tests that are testing out the action mode, which is supposed to make everything super smooth, make it a little bit more action camera-like and whatnot. The thing is, I don't have like a pet or like a kid or even someone else to like chase while running, but what I do have is a selfie stick and probably a pretty silly idea. So the main takeaways, at least for now. The main and ultra-wide cameras are already pretty well stabilized, and the action mode is probably best used for more extreme movements and activities. The fact that it can output 2.8K is really nice, because usually it defaults to 1080p in other iterations of this feature. The main sensor is larger and more powerful, but I'm all about that nice shallow depth of field that it provides. And as a straight-up auto shooter, there's no doubt that this is going to be a good camera system for almost anyone to use. So I'll put it to more work in either a dedicated camera test or as part of my final thoughts. Ooh, plenty to say already from just day one with the iPhone 14 Pro, and there is more to come. For more on the new iPhones, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Sound off by hitting the like button and letting me know your questions you might have in the comments. I'll try to answer some of them in my follow-up video. From there though, I'm going to go ahead and call it on day one with the iPhone 14 Pro. Thank you so much for watching and for hanging out with me again today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.